Remember, to go against the church is to go against God.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, where I cover vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. In this video, we're going to take a look at the vampires in the dark dystopian world from the movie Priest that came out in 2011. The film has a star-studded cast starring Paul Bettany, who you might know as Vision, but my favorite Paul Bettany movie is probably Legion. The movie Priest also stars Cam Gigondet, Maggie Q, and Carl Urban from The Boys. The movie is loosely based on the Korean comic book also named Priest. The comic book series was known for blending supernatural and Western genres, which we definitely see in the movie. One of my favorite parts about this movie is how it mixes religion, supernatural, Western, horror, and post-apocalyptic all in one, yet it fits it together pretty well. In this video, I want to explore the vampire species, how the war between vampires and humans started, and how the church became the supreme authority. If you enjoy videos about vampires and other supernatural creatures, leave a like and subscribe for new videos every week. Let's start all the way back at the beginning. No one knows how vampires were created, but they have existed as long as humans. They are a completely separate species that lives mostly underground in large hives. Since they evolved underground with no light, they do not have eyes, instead navigating the world through their other heightened senses. They are similar to insects, having a hive and a queen. These vampires are nothing like the ones from traditional folklore. Since the beginning of time, the two species have been locked in conflict. We see their wars stretching all the way back to the Crusades. The one thing the humans had on their side was the sun. They tried to use it to their advantage, blowing up their hives in the daylight. However, it wasn't enough. The two species had been locked in this war for so long that the Earth was destroyed as a result, leaving it a barren wasteland where nothing grows. This is pretty similar to Cyberpunk 2077, where a nuclear war destroyed most of the world. The vampires were still winning the war, and this left the remaining humans with no choice but to retreat behind the walled cities built by the church. Being the only safe haven left, this allowed the church to have complete control over people. Either follow their rules, or take your chances in the wasteland. The city reminds me of something I would see in Warhammer 40,000. The streets are cramped, and there are armed military-style police everywhere. It's littered with the symbols of the church and blasting religious propaganda through speakers. To go against the church is to go against God. This is like the city's catchphrase, if you will. During a certain time in the day, everybody stops and pays their respects to the church. We see there's many people lined up for their chance to enter the confessionals. But these are not ordinary confessionals. They're controlled by some kind of program that has a certain number of responses. The priest was questioning his faith and wanted answers, but he becomes frustrated when he only receives the same answers over and over from the recording. The man on the recording is the highest ranking Monsignor in the church. It seems this group of Monsignors are the governing body for the church. Eventually, with humanity's survival hanging by a thread, the church created a weapon to fight back against the vampires. The priests. These are warriors, specially trained in the art of killing vampires. Some say they wielded the hand of God. They were trained from children to be the best of the best, and they are. Their abilities seem to go beyond just advanced training, because they perform some truly supernatural feats like heightened reflexes, super strength, and being able to jump like they have the Force. The priests managed to mostly defeat the vampire threat, and the cities were safe. During this time of peace, the church decided to disband the priests and not allow them to continue their duty. In the aftermath of the war, these priests, once heroes, are forced to blend back into society. With their purpose fulfilled, they're treated like pariahs, an uncomfortable reminder of the horrors this world has endured.
Why can't I talk to them? We don't talk to priests.
The church also decided to build what they call reservations for the remaining vampires. These were basically prisons for the surviving vampires being watched over by guards. During the movie, we follow one of these priests. He gets news that his brother's family was attacked by vampires and they took his niece hostage, which we later learn is actually his daughter. He had to give her up for his life in the clergy. The other priests were taken as children, but we're told that his abilities didn't develop until later. For this reason, his sacrifice is considered greater than most. The priest has a brother that lives in the wasteland, beyond the city walls. There are many who don't want to live under the iron fist of the church, so they risk living in the wasteland. The Monsignor says the wasteland is a haven for the lawless and immoral. This gives us a good idea of how the church views the people that leave the city. There are some fair-sized towns in the wasteland, usually governed by a sheriff. There's even a railway that runs through some of these towns that connects to the city, probably to trade goods. These post-apocalyptic towns remind me of something you would see in a Fallout game. There's even a guy selling fake holy water trying to scam people.
Authenticated by the clergy themselves. Purchased.
The priest goes to the Monsignors after finding out his brother was attacked and asks for his authority to be reinstated so he can go after the vampires. But they refuse his request. Monsignor Aurelius insists that it must have been wasteland bandits. There is no vampire threat anymore. The priest says that the boy was very clear, that it was vampires. This makes the Monsignor angry. He says, "You must understand something, priest. The sanctuary of these walls is absolute, and the citizens from the cities have complete faith in the church's ability to keep them safe. You will not shake that faith." The priest then says, "What good is that faith if it's a lie?" This enrages the Monsignor even more, and he says questioning the authority of the clergy is absolutely forbidden. He tells the priest that if he tries to help his family, he will be stripped from the order and excommunicated. Now we know that the head Monsignor is more concerned about everyone's belief in the church and his power than if there's truly a vampire threat rising again. Like they say, to go against the church is to go against God. They have truly twisted the minds of their citizens. This part, along with the industrial look of the city and the religious tones everywhere, is what made me think of Warhammer 40k, the absolute rule of the church. To even question them is heresy.
I said, do I make myself clear, Father?
The priest ends up going against the church and leaving the city to go after his brother and family. Before leaving the city, we get this fight scene that displays the power of the priests. One of the other Monsignors actually appreciates the work of the priests and knows they would be dead without them, but he still tries to talk the priest out of going after his family. He repeats that to go against the church is to go against God. Suddenly, some armed guards enter the bar behind them. The priest breaks his rosary behind his back and manages to kill all the guards before the beads from the rosary stop moving. A human versus a priest is not a fair fight at all. Like I said before, they're basically like a Jedi. The priest leaves the city on his motorcycle, and we see these giant statues staring back at the city. These remind me of the statues from Lord of the Rings. Creepy and ominous. The priest arrives at his brother's farmhouse to find it ravaged. The sheriff that came to warn him about his brother arrives and takes the priest to his wounded brother. The actor that plays the priest's brother, Owen, also plays Bill Compton from True Blood, so a bit of a vampire crossover there. The vampires killed his brother's wife and took Lucy captive, so the priest goes after her with the help of the sheriff, who we find out is in a relationship with Lucy. Explains why he was so worried. The first place they go is the closest vampire reservation to see if they know anything about the vampire attack. When they arrive at the sanctuary, the first thing they notice is that there's no guards. That's a good sign. On top of the Monsignor dismissing rumors of vampire attacks, they aren't even checking in on the reservations. When they enter, the priest is shocked at what he sees. Familiars. These are basically vampire slaves. If you are bitten by a vampire or given vampire blood, you will become a familiar. Not a full vampire, but not a human anymore either. Familiars have pale skin, blue eyes, and their teeth are usually brown. As far as we know, they are still living creatures, just infected with something from the vampire species. It's never stated whether a familiar feeds on blood or not, but we see one familiar butchering chickens. They can also walk in sunlight, unlike vampires. Since familiars are slaves to their vampire masters, this implies that they can somehow understand them. It's possible vampires communicate with their familiars telepathically. We see a human bitten by a vampire, and within a matter of moments they become a familiar. Their skin goes pale and their eyes turn blue. While walking through the reservation, the priest says, "I thought familiars were illegal." The sheriff explains that they are, but nobody really enforces it out here. Drifters come from far away wanting to be turned. As far as we know, there's no way for a familiar to become a full vampire. They're just stuck as a vampire slave forever. But apparently that's what they want. The two men go into the underground area sealed by a hatch. This is where the vampires sleep in their crypts. There is blood all around, and again, no sign of any guards. They try to question a familiar about Lucy's kidnapping, but they are attacked by the other familiars. They make it outside, but only just in time for the sun to go down.
They get you gun arm.
Why?
You're gonna need it.
This is the first time we get to see the priests fight a full vampire. The vampires are extremely strong and fast, able to leap huge distances effortlessly. In this scene, they're able to jump anywhere from 20 to 30 feet with no problem. Even someone who is an extremely good shot, such as the sheriff, has a very hard time hitting vampires because of how fast they move. The priest also says because of their odd biology that they move in very strange and concentric patterns. As I said before, they have no eyes, so they navigate through their other senses. Their mouth has 2 large fangs on the top and bottom. The church says that eyes are the windows to the soul, and vampires have no eyes, so they have no soul. This is apparently a reason that the church thinks that vampires are a lesser species. It can't be overstated how deadly these vampires are, and they almost always operate in large numbers, which makes them even more terrifying. Nothing is mentioned about their lifespan. Most vampires from other series are immortal, or can live extremely long lives. In this movie, there's actually nothing mentioned about their lifespan. They appear to be mostly biological creatures, so I think they would have a finite lifespan. However, it's possible the Queen may be able to live for hundreds or even thousands of years. I find it interesting that the movie is so tied in with religion and holy symbols, yet they have no effect on the vampires. After defeating them, they find out the vampires took Lucy west. The priest points out that to the west is Solamira, one of the largest vampire hives. The sheriff says that all hives were supposed to be liquidated after the war, but the priest wants to check it out just to be safe. The priest also points out that there were over 50 crypts in this reservation, but there were only 6 vampires left, the weak that got left behind. So where are the rest? They arrive at the hive and it seems to be empty. Vampires build these hives by excreting a kind of goo that hardens. Gross. While the two explore Solamira, the priest bumps into another priest. After he disobeyed the church and went after Lucy, the Monsignor reinstated the other priests and told them to bring him back, dead or alive. Lucky for him, the priest that finds him does not obey the church. Instead, she joins him and the sheriff on their journey. While in the hive, they are attacked by a hive guardian, a much larger and stronger vampire. We only see one of these in the movie, so they must be quite rare, probably 1 per hive. After defeating the guardian, they find their worst fears, a part of the hive that's been rebuilt. They dug a hole through the hive and put an entire army onto a train. Inside, the vampires hang from fleshy cocoons. I guess this is how they sleep, or possibly these are new vampires. The train is about to reach Jericho, which is the last stop before the main cities. The 2 priests and the sheriff try to rush to Jericho, but there's no way they'll make it in time. The train arrives at Jericho and wreaks havoc on the town. Vampires spill from the train and kill everyone in sight. The other 3 priests just so happened to be in Jericho looking for the rogue priest, but they stood no chance against the leader of the vampire army. I've avoided the villain of the movie until now so I could explain him better. He is a human vampire. Not only that, he is a former priest. During the war, the priests were sent into a hive to kill the queen, but it turned out to be a trap. They all made it out, except for the one that comes to be known as Black Hat. For some reason, they don't give many names out in the movie. Like when you look up the cast, most people just have some generic name like Black Hat, Priest, Priestess, etc. Anyway, for many years the main priest thought that Black Hat was dead, but he wasn't. He eventually explains that he was taken into the hive and was being fed on by vampires. But the queen they had been sent there to kill turned out to be his savior. She is a massive creature, standing what looks to be anywhere from 10 to 15 feet tall with an odd-shaped head, huge wings, and humanoid hands with long nails. Instead of killing Black Hat, she gave him some of her blood, and this turned him into the first human vampire. I mentioned earlier that it's not exactly clear how vampires are created, but they seem to be similar to insects, having a hive and a queen. So I think we can assume that she probably gives birth to all vampires. Also, we don't know how old the queen is, so this could be the same queen that the vampires have had for all time. The queen's blood must have special properties, because we see that a normal vampire's blood can only turn someone into a familiar. The human vampire has to feed on blood, but can still walk in the sun like a familiar. However, unlike a familiar, he is not as pale. His eyes are yellow instead of blue, and he gains supernatural strength and speed. In Jericho, he is able to effortlessly kill 3 priests, in a brutal fashion nonetheless. Sheriff Hicks says, "Killing 3 priests? What kind of vampire could do that?" The main priest responds, "Nothing that we've ever seen before." Sheriff Hicks says, "But what about the sunlight? suggesting that even if the vampires made it to the main cities, that the sunlight would surely kill them. But the priest says, there is no sunlight in the cities. This line is almost like a throwaway line and is never really explained. But the main cities have become extremely cramped and industrialized. When the priest drives away, we can see all the smokestacks in the background, and there's a large black cloud over the cities. When he gets far enough away, we visually see him leave the darkened, polluted area. In the cities, it appears to be very dark all the time. So if the vampires made it inside the city, they wouldn't have to worry about daylight, and they could kill for as long as they like. The implications of the vampires reaching the city and this pollution, I feel like, is really understated. We also get an answer to why the vampires kidnapped Lucy in the first place. Black Hat did it because he knew it would draw out the priest, which would in turn draw out the others to go after him, leaving the main cities without their most important defense. Black Hat plans to drive the train full of vampires right into the main cities and kill everyone. Black Hat also offers all the other priests the chance to drink the Queen's blood as well and become a human vampire. Of course they refuse, but it seems that Black Hat wanted to make an army of human vampires, or at least build up their numbers. He only offered this to the other priests though. Maybe he thought only a priest was worthy of this gift. The two remaining priests, along with Sheriff Hicks, manage to stop the train and save Lucy. The priest fights Black Hat and saves Lucy while the priestess launched one of the motorcycles into the front of the train, causing it to explode and kill Black Hat. This was really their only hope of killing the human vampire, because he was extremely overpowered. Priests are already insanely strong. Augmented with the abilities of the vampire, they had no chance. The priest comes back to the city with the head of a vampire. The Monsignor is furious that he would dare return to this holy city. The priest takes out the head and throws it at his feet and says, check the burning train beyond the walls and you'll find hundreds more. Instead of being grateful, the Monsignor becomes angry and says there is no vampire menace, and this priest is nothing but a charlatan. I guess they will never learn from their mistakes until it's too late.
The war is over!
It's just beginning.
One question I've always had is, are these vampires truly a biological species, or was there some supernatural element to their creation? The fact that they are not weak to any kind of religious symbols made me think that they were biological. So I looked to the comic book to possibly find some answers. However, the comic book doesn't have vampires at all. Instead, it has to do with humanity fighting 12 fallen angels who came to Earth to play God. Temples and statues were built in their honor. This did not last though. For their rebellion, God destroyed their temples and imprisoned their souls in the statues. I wonder if these statues in the wasteland are a nod to this detail from the comics. Eventually, the fallen angels escape, and the priest tries to defeat them. Instead of a righteous priest, the one in the comics is possessed by a demon. So it's fair to say the movie is almost nothing like the series it's based on. Given the material in the comics, it makes me wonder if somehow the vampires from the film could trace their roots back to a fallen angel. Or perhaps the Queen herself could be a fallen angel of some kind. We've seen in the past how popular that idea is in vampire lore. Black Hat even referred to the Queen as his angel of mercy. However, the Queen being a fallen angel is just a theory. That's my video on the vampire movie Priest. One of the things I've always found interesting in this movie is the mix of genres. Western, post-apocalyptic, action, horror, vampires, and like I said earlier, the way the church rules and everything is based around them reminds me of Warhammer 40k at times. But did the film manage to hit its mark? Well, that's a tough question. The movie received mixed reviews, with some praising its visual style and unique genre blend, while others felt it fell short of its potential. I think I fall somewhere in the middle. I think the movie is better than some people give it credit for, but it definitely fell short of what it could have been given the great ideas they had and the source material. Regardless of its reception, you can't deny that Priest is a unique take on the vampire genre. When you explain the movie to someone, it sounds really interesting, but there's just a little something that holds it back from being one of the greats. It has such a good cast too. My guess why some people don't like it is probably a bit of the dialogue writing, and there was a lot going on with the story. The vampire army returning, Black Hat being the former priest that was lost, the kidnapping of Lucy, the church sending the priests after the main priest, all the stuff between the priests and the church. I feel like the movie needed another half hour to flush everything out, or the story needed to be trimmed down a bit to stay more focused. I think there was a lot of potential with the fallen angel stuff from the comic. They should have tied that in somehow. Personally, I enjoy the movie because of the unique world it takes place in, the different take on vampires, and there's a lot of moments that are genuinely entertaining, like when they go into the vampire reservation. Let me know what you guys think of this movie. I know there has to be a few other people that also enjoy it. If there's any other movies or TV shows you want me to cover, please leave them in the comments below. I always read through them and I've been looking for some new ideas on stuff to cover. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. It helps out a lot and I really appreciate it. As always, an extra big thanks to my members for supporting the channel. I honestly can't tell you how much it means that all of you went out of your way to be a part of my channel. A big thanks to Roderick, Awesome Pea Shooter, Jason Miller, Cyper2890, Zothra's Paradox, Adam Mokabe, Gabriel Ragsdale, Matthew Batson, Dragonfey Rose, Emily Nixon, Onyx Cat, Jake Walker, Mark Thorpe, Stephen556, Owen Wildish, and Joseph Roman. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.